All right, thanks so much, Ms. Wells. I will call this meeting of the Senate Judiciary Committee to order on April 5th of 2021. Would the secretary please call the roll?
Vice Chair Cannizzaro.
Here.
Senator Orenshaw.
Here.
Senator Harris.
Here.
Senator Settlemyre.
Here.
Senator Hansen.
Here.
Senator Pickard.
Here.
Chair Scheibel.
Here. And we have everybody present on this lovely Monday afternoon, including our two fantastic LCB staff members, Patrick Guinan, our policy analyst, and Nick Anthony, our committee counsel. We have 3 bills up for hearing today, and I will go in numerical order, which is also the order they're listed on the agenda. Starting with SB 358, we are joined by the Vice Chair, Majority Leader, Senator Cannizzaro, to present this bill, and I will now turn it over to you.
Excellent. And thank you, Chair Scheibel and members of the committee. I will begin the presentation then with Senate Bill number 358, which deals with the lawful intercept of wire communications. For the record, my name is Nicole Cannizzaro. I currently represent Senate District 6 in the northwest portion of the Las Vegas Valley, and I'm pleased to be here with you this afternoon for my brief introductory remarks on Senate Bill 358. It proposes to establish that it is not unlawful to intercept a wire communication in certain circumstances. I have with me as well Nate Chio from the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, and and Chair Scheibel. With your permission, what I would like to do is walk through the bill, provide some brief comments, and then turn it over to Lieutenant Chio for some additional remarks, and then we would both be able to stand ready to answer questions that the committee have.
That sounds like an excellent plan. Please proceed.
Thank you, Chair Scheibel. By way of background information, telecommunications carriers maintain facilities that allow law enforcement to intercept communications under a court order, which is also known as a lawful interception. Senate Bill 358 proposes to expand the scope of lawful interception to include certain emergency situations involving hostages or where an individual has barricaded himself or herself and law enforcement does not have the ability to timely obtain a warrant. This bill expands parameters that allow for the recording of wire communication without consent. Under existing law, the interception or attempt to intercept communications is only allowed in emergency circumstances if one of the parties involved in the communication has consented. Senate Bill 358 adds another exception to this prohibition by specifying that interception of communications is lawful in 2 situations. 1, if the person has barricaded himself or herself and is not complying with requests of law enforcement in circumstances in which there is an imminent threat or risk of harm to the person or to others, or 2, if the person has created a hostage situation. As you can imagine, these types of situations can often be not only dynamic in nature, but also complicated and potentially dangerous for those who are involved. And Senate Bill 358 is needed to ensure that law enforcement personnel are not criminally or civilly liable for intercepting or attempting to intercept those communications when they are involved in those situations involving a barricaded individual or hostages. This bill is done in an effort to ensure that we can not only safely address these situations, but can also timely address them. And I am going to, at this point, Chair Scheibel, turn the presentation over to Lieutenant Chio, who will be able to provide some additional remarks and some background on the purpose and the reasons why Senate Bill 358 is a necessary piece of legislation. Lieutenant Chio, when you're ready.
Good afternoon. Thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Lieutenant Nate Chio. Last name is Chio. I'm currently a lieutenant with the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, employed here for the last 25 years. My current assignment is the lieutenant of the Special Investigations Section, and I am also the Crisis Negotiation Team Leader, which is the unit that responds with the LVMPD SWAT teams on barricaded suspects, armed suicidal subjects, hostage crisis situations, and also terroristic threats. The reason that we are in support of this bill and the reason why we have brought this bill forward is that in attempt for transparency for the police department, we want to be able to record these conversations so that there's no misunderstandings and there's no miscommunications between the negotiators and the suspects that may be barricaded or have taken hostages. It is critical as a CNT member to be able to, during the event, multiple times the suspect may hang up and communication has to be reestablished at a later time. But during that time, having a recorded conversation, we can review that statement and that conversation to try to get some insight on how to gain rapport and how to better communicate with the suspect or the barricaded suspect inside the residence. In an effort for transparency, once the event is over, these recordings can be reviewed by a third party or by anybody in the court system so that any kind of false allegations or any allegations made by the suspect can be either confirmed or denied, because now we do have a hard recording. The problem that we have seen in my experience as a negotiator, I was on the negotiator team for several years prior to my promotion to lieutenant and have just recently taken over as a team leader, was as you are trying to establish communication with these suspects, that is the hardest challenge. Usually the people that are barricaded or that have taken hostages are in a state of crisis, which means that their rational reasoning is at a state right now where they do not have, they're based on emotion. So to try to establish communication is very hard when the first thing that you have to say because of the current law is, hello, this conversation is being recorded. Right there have been instances that I have been part of where the suspect immediately hangs up. Because of that, prior to this legislative session, it was not worth the risk of not being able to establish the rapport of having that disclaimer, putting that out there to the suspect, because that is our main goal, is to try to establish that communication. In closing, I would like to say that this bill is not going to get rid of a single party or dual party consent. It is just for these emergency situations that are high crisis and very critical. And each time we go on one of these situations, there is a life in the balance and a chance to save a life for our team.
And in closing, Chair Scheibel and members of the committee, we want to thank you for taking the time to listen to this brief presentation on Senate Bill 358, and now stand ready to answer any questions that you or members of the committee may have.
Thank you so much, Madam Majority Leader. And let's go first to Senator Hansen.
Thanks, Madam Chair. A couple of quick questions. One, the bill seems totally reasonable. Is this in response to Carpenter versus U.S., that 2017 decision that said you guys can't do any kind of surveillance in the absence of a search warrant because it violates the Fourth Amendment? Is that, because what I don't understand is this all seems totally reasonable. Why does the poor lieutenant have to ask permission basically to record a conversation in a situation like that? So I'm just kind of wondering, does Metro have some kind of policy now that does not allow them to use Stingray type technologies to both find the people and then listen to their conversations?
Senator, I can answer that question. Carpenter v. U.S. dealt with cell site information, which basically dealt...
Put your name on the record, please.
I'm sorry, Lieutenant Nate Chio from the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. Carpenter v. U.S. Dealt with cell site location information, which basically meant that the police department had to gain a warrant to get the location of a suspect using cell site information. In this instance, the reason why we have to ask for permission is because of the current Nevada law that says that both parties must consent absent a wiretap order for their conversation to be recorded.
Okay, so this is a Nevada state law. This has nothing to do with Carpenter versus U.S. then. Okay, well, I just wanted to get that on the record because you know, I'm very concerned about the constant expansion of surveillance techniques, the electronic surveillance stuff that's becoming increasingly sophisticated and frankly kind of tempting for law enforcement to probably use without a search warrant. So thank you, Madam Vice Chair, too. The bill seems completely reasonable. Chair Scheibel, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to ask these questions.
Sure, thank you, Senator Hansen. Let's go next to Senator Pickard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree. This seems reasonable. I guess I had a different take on NRS 20620 because I thought that you had a 72-hour window once the emergency is identified. It was my understanding that under sub 1B, you had the ability to capture these conversations without the consent that's required, the two-party consent that's required. And then I think it's sub 3 that talks about a 72-hour window. How does this differ from, or what was not working with the prior exception that this bill currently captures?
From a practical standpoint, sir, you are absolutely correct. There is a subsection in the current law. This is Lieutenant Nate Chio from Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. There is a current exception in the law where you have a 72-hour ratification period. However, within that law, that ratification can be affirmed or denied. And it also, with that time period, the CNT team is a part-time auxiliary position. I have a full-time job as a special investigations section. And then I also lead the CNT team on these high incident crises. And for every member of my team, they also have full-time jobs, either as detectives, supervisors, things like that. So as with that 72-hour window, it's just a little bit of a challenge for us at times if we were to declare an emergency and have that ratification period to get it within the 72 hours because of what may be going on. For instance, last year, we had to deal with the civil unrest and everybody was at work for long periods of time. And the other part that is a challenge is that it may be denied at a later time if someone decides that it wasn't really an emergency at this point. So there is a chance that it could be challenged and overturned. Which is why we're just asking for it in this very narrow instance and circumstances that we are allowed to just record.
And I appreciate that. I guess when I was looking at this, I'm thinking, you know, I know well one district court judge who's regularly on the warrants and TPO rotations. So she's awakened at the odd hours of the morning sometimes to issue these kind of warrants. And so I don't think that there's a problem, at least on the judicial side of this equation. And it was always my impression that the review process, that 72-hour window, was a check against maybe, and not that Metro ever applies or requests these warrants without justification, but you know, if there maybe wasn't really the emergency that they expected, it does, you know, it's a check on that system. So if I understand your statement, then this is limited to barricade situations or hostage situations where you don't want the possibility of that check coming back and invalidating the recording, which would then make it unusable in the proceedings. Is that correct?
That is correct, sir. An example, a real life example I can give you right now is 2 days ago, we were involved in an armed barricade with a homicide suspect. This homicide suspect had fired rounds from inside the house at police officers and at us. During that conversation, although he would not, because of some technical difficulties, we weren't able to capture the conversation because he had shot at the robot. But if this barricade had gone on and we had captured that conversation and it was later challenged in court, that may jeopardize the ensuing murder trial or anything like that.
Sure, but are you suggesting that the judge would probably have invalidated that didn't constitute an emergency such that it only took the officer and the affidavit and the request within 72 hours. I would imagine in that circumstance, the judge would readily grant it.
I would hope so, sir. But after 25 years of law enforcement, nothing seems to surprise me anymore.
Sure, thank you. And thank you, Chair Scheibel, for letting me ask the question.
Sure. And Lieutenant Choi, I have a couple of questions myself. The first one is about how often this occurs. I think Metro keeps those stats. I'm just wondering how many barricades the team runs into in an average year.
We're one of the busiest C&T teams in the country. Usually we average anywhere between 50 to 60. This year was particularly busy. Since January 1st, we're already at 23.
Wow. And my next two questions are about the recording itself. I noticed that in on lines 41 through 44 on page number 2, it's the beginning of the new language. It's obviously nested within a section about peace officers, but it actually says that it's not unlawful if the person is intercepting the communication of a person who has, and then spells out the subsections. And I'm wondering if that's because you guys do employ crisis negotiators and other professionals who might not actually be peace officers, but who are engaged in these conversations with subjects.
Yes. So within our C&T team, we do have civilians. On my team right now, I have a civilian psychologist as part of the team. I have another civilian that's a trained mental health professional. Although she's not a psychologist, she is a mental health professional. And I have also another civilian that is an investigative specialist who is a civilian counterpart of a detective.
Okay, so then this would cover all of them as well?
Yes, ma'am.
Or conversations with all of them as well?
Yes, ma'am.
And so that brings me to my last question, which is that it just occurs to me that it seems like this could also be a great training tool to be able to have these conversations recorded for, future crisis negotiators. And I'm wondering if that's something that you already do or would consider doing with these recordings, or if I'm off base.
Ma'am, I would love to be able to use that. Right now, what we do use for training is face-to-face negotiations, because whenever we do have face-to-face negotiations, or we don't have to worry about an electronic communication, we do record those and we go over them with the team. In fact, later on this month, we are having a negotiator basic school to try to bring new candidates up to the team. And a lot of our case studies are using some of those recorded conversations that are just face-to-face, or ones where the suspect has called into 911 and where we are able to record those because he has called into the 911 system. But you are absolutely correct. It's a great training tool for us to use.
Excellent, thank you. And it looks like we have one more question from Senator Settlemyer. And Lieutenant, I'm just going to remind you to put your name on the record before you answer this time.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate the opportunity to ask a question. I was just kind of curious, within this aspect, if you obtain any information and it's utilized elsewhere, what's the penalty? So let's say that, you think it's for a barricade or something like that, and ends out, you obtain other information and somehow it gets leaked, to the general public, and it causes damage. Somebody said something inappropriate or to that nature. What happens with that type of a situation? Is a person guilty of anything for leaking confidential information that was obtained through this process, or what would the penalty be?
Lieutenant Nate Chio, from my understanding, this actual law 200.4620, or I'm sorry, 200.620, it's a felony to break this law. So there are consequences for that. What I will say is we don't take barricaded subjects in situations lightly. Usually my team and the SWAT team does not get called out to a barricaded suspect for at least an hour or so into the event. And that is only after the patrol officers and everyone have tried every kind of diffusing, de-escalation technique that they can to convince this person to come out. The only time that we get deployed there in the 4 years as a crisis negotiation team member, and in the last 4 or 5 months that I've been the crisis negotiation team leader, I can say in my practical experience, there's never been a situation where it's not an actual barricaded suspect. And this law does clearly define what a barricaded suspect is. He must have a refusal to law enforcement that he is not coming out. And that is something that we do not deploy, or we do not employ any of this, any of our tactics until we make sure that we do have a barricaded suspect.
Thank you, Chair. I was just curious. Let me be a little more frank. So, in other words, I'm thinking of the old argument of fruit to the poisonous tree with evidence. Is this information necessary to get individuals out of harm's way, or would this information also be admissible in a court of law in order to convict someone of crimes or someone else's crimes in that matter? Or is this only information pertinent and only usable to diffuse the situation?
Lieutenant Nate Chio, in answer to that question, anytime that we are going to be using this and making a recording, we are creating evidence. So it is something that would be used in the proceeding or the judicial process afterwards. We would be, every time we do a recording or anything like that, even our reports are all discoverable. We turn them over to the case agents and they are discoverable to the defense.
Thank you. That's information I was looking for. Thank you, and thank you, Chair.
Sure. I see Senator Picker's hand back up. We have time, so I'll let you do a second round. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Scheibel. That question just spurred a question in my mind. But this would necessarily create a presumption of admissibility for evidence that the judge in the criminal trial felt was truly fruit of the poisonous tree. Just because we're removing this from the criminal statute as to the interception, it doesn't mean that it would deprive the court of discretion to, if the court felt that it was inappropriate, that the emergency didn't, and I'm not saying this is likely, I'm just trying to think through the logic, that the court, the criminal court, could then say, no, I don't agree, this wasn't an emergency, we're going to exclude this evidence if the judge thought that was the right thing to do. This wouldn't create a presumption in that respect, would it?
Lieutenant Nacio, I'll have to defer to Senator Canizaro on those kind of legal questions. I don't think so from my understanding as a law enforcement professional, but I would defer to someone that practices law and has a law degree on that one.
And Chair Scheibel, through you to Senator Pickard, Nicole Canizaro, Senate District 6. And Senator, I think what you're seeing here is an exception to where the interception would be deemed lawful. That does not mean that a court would have to admit the evidence. It's a little bit different than fruit of the poisonous tree, because that would require a finding of a court on a challenge, usually under the Fourth Amendment search and seizure clause, that there had been some sort of improper search and seizure, and therefore anything found pursuant to that would be deemed fruit of the poisonous tree and must be suppressed. Generally, that happens in motion practice. Typically, you may see that in a defective warrant, for example, if there was an actually probable cause, and the court were later to find that, then anything that had been found as a result of the execution of that warrant would be deemed fruit of the poisonous tree. So evidence of a crime that had been committed would be suppressed in the court of law. What this is saying is that actual wire interception, which we're seeking to allow to happen in these very narrow circumstances where there's a barricade or where there is a hostage situation, that those wire interceptions, it's not unlawful for them to obtain the wire interceptions. Now, if in the course of that, there were some other intervening instance that might arise, potentially you have an argument under the Fourth Amendment or under some other statutory provision that it should be excluded. And nothing about this would mean that the court would have to admit any of this evidence. That would still be subject to motion practice. But this in and of itself, because it was a wire intercept during a hostage or barricade situation, would still be legally permissible. It doesn't prevent the court from then, entertaining arguments as to why or why not. Potentially, it doesn't fall under the hostage situation. They went farther than what the statute permits. They obtained something that then led to something else that then might be suppressible But what this is saying is that it's not, I don't know if I would call it a presumption necessarily, but that obtaining this wirestep in and of itself is not an illegal seizure of some kind, although I don't know if I would characterize it that way. This wouldn't prevent a court from obviously litigating some of those other issues. But realistically, I think that's in part a decision for this committee to make, is whether or not these situations are of such a nature that we would want to make sure that they are recorded. If there was evidence of a crime that occurred, or this particular intercept provides evidence of a crime that occurred, certainly likely would want to be admissible at trial. And there could always be motion practice to suppress that on a number of grounds. That would ultimately be up to.
All right, thank you. I just, I defer to you on this. Obviously, you practice in this area. I just was going back to the thought that 72-hour ratification was, in my view, the check on the ability of law enforcement to step over that line. And I wanted to make sure that we still had a check in place. So I'm comfortable with that. Thank you for your response, and thank you, Chair Scheibel.
Sure. I don't see any other questions. So we will move on to testimony in support of SB 358.
Thank you, Chair Scheibel. To testify in support on Senate Bill 358, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Once again, to testify in support on Senate Bill 358, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 620, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. For the record, Mike Cathcart, C-A-T-H-C-A-R-T, representing the City of Henderson. First, I want to thank the Majority Leader for sponsoring this legislation and the Metropolitan Police Department for assisting with the presentation. We believe this would be a good tool for law enforcement, and we are fully supportive of SB 358. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. Caller with the last 3 digits, 648, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
Thank you, Chair Scheibel, members of the Senate Judiciary Committee. My name is John Jones here on behalf of the Nevada District Attorneys Association. That's JOHNJONES. We too want to thank Senator Leader Cannizzaro for bringing this bill. SB 358 provides a very narrow exception to our wire intercept statute in very serious, volatile situations, and we are in support. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, caller. If you've recently joined us this afternoon, we're currently on support testimony for Senate Bill 358. If you've just arrived and would like to provide support testimony at this time, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 196, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair Scheibel and members of the committee. I'm Eric Spratley, E-R-I-C-S-P-R-A-T-L-E-Y, the Executive Director of the Nevada Sheriffs and Chiefs Association, here in support of Senate Bill 358, and appreciate the Majority Leader bringing this important bill today. We also thank Metro for the great presentation and information, and this committee for considering this bill. Thank you, Chair Scheibel.
Thank you, caller. As a reminder, if you've just joined us this afternoon, we're currently on support testimony for Senate Bill 358. If you've just arrived and would like to provide support testimony at this time, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
Hello, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. This is Chuck Callaway, C-A-L-L-A-W-A-Y, representing the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. I know we have Lieutenant Chio helping present the bill, but I wanted the record to be clear that the agency is in support. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. And as a reminder, we are currently on support testimony for Senate Bill 358. If you've recently joined us and would like to provide support testimony at this time, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 887, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair Scheibel, Vice Chair Canizaro, and members of the Senate Judiciary Committee. My name is Corey Solferino. It's C-O-R-E-Y. Last of S as in Sam, O-L, F as in Frank, E-R-I-N-O. And I represent the Washoe County Sheriff's Office. We wanted to take this opportunity to thank Senator Canizaro for bringing this piece of legislation forward, and we encourage your support of SB 358. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, caller. And with that, Chair Scheibel, there are no more callers to give support testimony at this time.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kyle. We will move to testimony in opposition to SB 358.
Thank you, Chair. To testify in opposition on Senate Bill 358, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Once again, to give opposition testimony to Senate Bill 358, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 360, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
Good afternoon. My name is Sarah Hawkins, S-A-R-A-H-H-A-W-K-I-N-S. I am here on behalf of Nevada Attorneys for Criminal Justice in opposition to SB 358. The primary reason we're in opposition of SB 358 is it's entirely unnecessary. Police already have the power to do this when there is an emergency situation that exists. It's interesting that Lieutenant Chio described and used the word emergency in letting us know why this is necessary. If there's an emergency, police can already do this. There's absolutely no reason to make laws that are duplicative. For those reasons, NACJ opposes. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, caller. And with that, Chair, there are no more callers to give opposition testimony at this time.
Thank you again, Mr. Kyle. We will move to testimony in the neutral position on SB 358.
Thank you, Chair. To testify in neutral standing on SB 358, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Again, to give neutral testimony on SB 358, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. And Chair Scheibel, at this time, there are no callers to give neutral testimony.
All right, thank you very much. I will go back to our sponsor and presenter, Vice Chair Canizaro. Do you have any closing remarks?
Thank you, Chair Scheibel. I want to thank you and the members of the committee for allowing me to present Senate Bill 358. I think one of the important pieces of this is that these hostage and barricade situations are not only dangerous, but also very dynamic in that they are often met with, as you heard from Lieutenant Chio, a number of individuals, some of whom are law enforcement, some of whom are are mental health professionals, and the ability to make sure that there are recordings of what is happening in these situations, not only protect all of the parties involved on the law enforcement side and those involved from a medical professional standpoint, but also from the individuals who are involved in these situations as well, to ensure that everything that's happening with respect to the police departments and the mental health professionals and the other individuals who may be part of these situations really are what we expect of them in those situations. And so I am grateful to Lieutenant Chio for being here to help answer questions and present the bill, and certainly hoping to earn support from members of the committee. So thank you again for allowing me to speak here.
All right, in that case, we will close the hearing on SB 358, and we will open the hearing on SB 359, which is also being presented by our Vice Chair of Judiciary and Majority Leader, Senator Canizaro.
Thank you, Chair Scheibel and members of the committee. Again, for the record, my name is Nicole Canizaro. I currently serve as a senator from Senate District 6, which is located in the northwest portion of the Las Vegas Valley. I am pleased to be here today to present for your consideration Senate Bill 359, which establishes enhanced penalties for illegal drug manufacturing that results ultimately in a fire or explosion. In recent years, Chair and members of the committee, we've seen increased demand for synthetic drugs, and as a result of illegal drug manufacturing being part of that, it becomes more common than I think we typically realize. Illegal drug manufacturing poses a significant law enforcement and emergency response issue in our state. And, excuse me, and the actual physical dangers, of course, can be overwhelmingly hazardous. The chemicals used to produce methamphetamines, for example, are highly explosive and may ignite or explode if mixed or stockpiled inadequately. Fire and explosion presents dangers not only to the individuals creating the drug, but also to anyone in the immediate area, including children, neighbors, and anyone innocently passing by. This can also happen in a number of residential areas and thus exacerbate some of the dangerousness that surrounds these activities. Senate Bill 359 is a fairly simple bill. It establishes an enhanced penalty for those manufacturing or compounding a controlled substance other than marijuana, and includes language that if a fire or explosion occurs as a result of the manufacturing or compounding of a controlled substance, in addition to those other penalties in law, those individuals are also guilty of the crime of arson, depending on the degree that is contained within the NRS currently. Chair Scheibel, I will note that I have with me today Dan Heenan, who is the Assistant Fire Chief with the Clark County Fire Department, who can further talk a little bit about this issue and the reasons why Senate Bill 359 and the reasons why we believe that Senate Bill 359 is a necessary piece of legislation. And I did want to note for members of the committee that I did receive some correspondence from John Pirro from the Public Defender's Office today that was indicating some requests to ensure that the bill was, one, not meant to get at current legal marijuana manufacturers. I wanted to ensure the committee that we'll make sure that the bill is not sort of touching on those particular industries. It was certainly not our intent to include some of that. And then also to address some of the concerns over clarity of which degree of arson. In Senate Bill 359, it does indicate that it would be the degree of arson 205, and the varying degrees of arson. It does depend on what type of property it is, if it's abandoned or it's occupied, if it's a structure, if it's personal property. And so I believe that that is what the bill is intending to get at when it refers to the proper degree of arson, that it would be dependent upon those same factors that you already see in Chapter 205. So I did want to note that for the record, because I did receive some communication with Mr. Pirro and have not had a chance to make sure that that is clear in the bill. But with your permission, Chair Scheibel, what I would like to do at this point is to turn it over to Chief Heenan to talk a little bit more about the reasons for Senate Bill 359, and then we would be willing to answer any questions that you or members of the committee may have.
Good afternoon. May I begin? Okay, good afternoon, Senators. Thank you very much for allowing me a few minutes to speak on this topic. And I'd like to thank Senator Canizaro for introducing this bill. The reason behind this bill is that obviously throughout Nevada's history, we've had, especially in the last decade or so, we've had problems with illegal drug manufacturing, specifically back in the day, methamphetamine. And methamphetamine production is exceedingly dangerous. It's exceedingly dangerous in how they produce it because there's so many volatile chemicals. We now see it reoccurring in the valley, Las Vegas Valley, and throughout the state with the illegal production of marijuana grows and then the illegal production of butane hash oil. And I'll speak to each one of those separately. If I may step back for a second, my position here is the Assistant Fire Chief of the Clark County Fire Department, and I oversee the Fire Investigations Division, commonly referred to as the Arson Unit. I've been doing this only for the past 3 years, but prior to that, I was a special agent with the United States Department of Justice, Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms for 30 years. When I was with ATF, I was a certified fire investigator for the last 25 years, and I headed up the United States National Response Team that traveled throughout the United States and foreign countries for fire and explosions to assist our state and local and international partners in determining why, how, and where a fire started or explosion. So that's the genesis and the background of where I come from this. Speaking specifically to this bill, right now, throughout the Las Vegas Valley specifically, but throughout the state, when somebody does an illegal marijuana grow, and I'm not referring to the legal manufacturing that we now allow in the state, but the illegal manufacturing still exists, black market manufacturing. And in many times what someone will do is they'll lease a house, they'll rent that house, and plant marijuana plants throughout the whole structure. Anything over 12 is illegal. 12 plants, no matter the maturity of those plants, is illegal. And these people are planting upwards 200, 300, 400, 500 plants in here. In order to sustain that, though, you need a lot of power. You need a lot of heat lamps, and you need a lot of water irrigation. So what they're doing is they're circumventing the meter, and they're going right to NV Energy's main supply, and they're capping in on that. So they're basically stealing power from NV Energy. This creates an issue when the house isn't structurally designed for wattage and current of that nature. So we have a fire develop in the house. When the fire department gets there, one of their first missions is to secure the power so that they're not introducing water into a system or structure that has electricity in it. Unbeknownst to them, the power was circumvented and coming from the main distribution feed. So the fire department goes in with active hose lines to put this fire out, and they have an energized compartment that they're working in. So it's a very dangerous position for the firefighters. Secondarily, butane hash oil has become bigger and bigger, especially the illegal manufacturing. Butane hash oil leads to massive explosions, and those explosions result in thermal injuries to the person producing them, but oftentimes to people outside of that compartment. So outside of that apartment, maybe an adjoining apartment or somebody walking by. The most common, and that's why it's referred to as butane hash oil, the most common is the use of butane, and butane is put through the resins of the marijuana, and it drips down and produces what's called wax or shatter. And some of this can be up to 90% THC, so there's a big demand for this. The problem is butane hash oil is exceedingly explosive, and it's heavier than air. So as these people are pouring the butane through the tube, the vapors collect at the ground. And then any spark or accidental ignition source, like a cigarette, or lighting of a cigarette, or spark from a refrigerator or an AC unit, will then, if you're in the explosive limits, create a massive explosion in which people are injured and killed. I was speaking a few months ago in California at an arson investigators conference, and the speaker that followed me is from Davis, California, where they also have legal marijuana. And he stated somewhere around 40% of the people in the Davis Burn Center are now there because of butane hash oil explosions. So that creates fewer people in the fewer hospital beds for first responders or other people. This is why we like this. Right now, arson is defined as a willful and intentional, willful malicious. So we have to prove that the person willfully committed this act to be charged with arson. There's no methamphetamine user or manufacturer or illegal drug person that will intentionally blow up their lab, but the resulting danger is massive to the first responders and the community at large. So we wanted to add that when some gross negligence like this is occurring, that if there is an arson or explosion, it results in whatever degree that Senator Canizero spoke about of arson would be predominantly there. And that's all I have at this point, but I'll answer questions when asked.
And Chair Scheibel, that does conclude our brief presentation of Senate Bill 359. We would be ready to stand open to any questions that you or members of the committee might have.
Thank you so much. We'll start with Senator Settlemyre.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate that. I was just kind of curious. This still wouldn't prevent an individual, let's say who had marijuana or hemp that ended up not being able to be harvested either due to the fact that it was so low, it was not advantageous, or so high that it was hemp was ruled too high, which puts it in the marijuana category. A lot of them, say you have to plow it back in, but this wouldn't preclude someone from spraying the field and burning it before plowing it, correct? I just want to make sure that that's on the record.
This is Chief Heenan. I'm not. I'm a fire expert. I'm not an expert on narcotic usage or manufacturing. I don't think that would even come close to reaching the concept behind what we're doing. We're looking at illegal manufacturing and production, normally within a structure, because that's where you're going to get the explosive limits. If people do stuff like this outside, I can't imagine where you would have an explosion, but there could be a fire, but I don't think that fits the concept of what we're looking for in this one.
Okay, just wanted to get that on the record. I was specifically looking at the last page, page 4, in addition to any other punishment that would be imposed if you manufacture, grow, plant, cultivate, harvest. And so I just wanted to make sure that, again, it's not considered arson as long as it is your own property and it was strictly for agricultural purposes. Anyways, just making sure, because I don't want to see that particular section of law change. Anyway, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Sure. Any other questions on SB 359? I am not seeing any, so we will go to testimony in support of SB 359.
Thank you, Chair Scheibel. To testify in support on Senate Bill 359, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Once again, to testify in support on Senate Bill 359, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 648, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
Thank you, Chair Scheibel and members of the Senate Judiciary Committee. My name is John Jones, here on behalf of the Nevada District Attorneys Association. That's JOHNJONES. We are here in support of SB 359 and want to thank Leader Canizaro and Assistant Chief Heenan for bringing the bill. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. And as a quick reminder, we are currently on support testimony for Senate Bill 359. If you'd like to provide support testimony at this time, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. And Chair, at this time, there are no more callers to give support testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Kyle. We will move on to testimony in opposition to SB 359.
Thank you, Chair. To testify in opposition on Senate Bill 359, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Once again, to provide opposition testimony on SB 359, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 611, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the Senate Judiciary Committee. This is John Piro, JOHNPIRO, from the Clark County Public Defender's Office. And we are in opposition, but we do want to thank the Majority Leader for hearing some of our concerns. Because arson involves willful and malicious conduct, and there's 4 different degrees of arson, we're concerned about how arson is referenced here. I will point the committee, however, there is a statute, NRS 475.040, that deals with gross negligence. I'm not saying that we should add this into that statute, but I'm saying we could pull language from that statute and perhaps make the resulting fire that comes from an illegal drug lab part of that, because I could never see having an illegal drug lab being not negligent conduct. So we are not opposed to the intent of the bill, just the way it would be implemented, and making sure, I know it's not the intent of the bill to mess with any legal growers of marijuana, but we want to just make sure the language is as tight as possible to make sure that it doesn't do that. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. Caller with the last three digits, 318. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and may begin. Once again, caller with the last three digits, 318. Please press *6 again to unmute yourself. All right, we will move on. Caller with the last three digits, 360. Please press *6 to unmute. Then slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
My name is Sarah Hawkins, SarahHawkins. I am here on behalf of Nevada Attorneys for Criminal Justice in opposition of SB 359 for a couple of reasons. First and foremost, this kind of conduct is already covered by the myriad statutes contained in Chapter 453 of the Nevada Revised Statutes. It defines manufacturing, it provides additional penalties where there is any injury or death, including to a firefighter during cleanup or in response to a lab situation. So for those reasons, this is an unnecessary provision. In addition to that, it poses some danger to hold folks responsible who don't have any responsibility for the fire that occurs. Let's say, for example, you have a person who is running a lab, which is a dangerous situation we will acknowledge. But that person goes out, is going about their business, and a competing drug dealer sets fire to the lab. Now, all of a sudden, the person who owns the building, who was in charge of the lab, has an arson charge on top of everything else, even though that person did not engage in that criminal conduct. We should never be in a position where we are punishing someone for something they did not do. We should not be supporting strict liability crimes like this would be. For those reasons, the Nevada Attorneys for Criminal Justice opposes this bill, and we urge committee members to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. And as a reminder, we are currently on opposition testimony for Senate Bill 359. If you'd like to provide opposition testimony at this time, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last three digits, 318. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair Scheibel and members of the Senate Judiciary. My apologies for earlier, it was not letting me unmute. I want to first start by thanking Senator Cannizzaro, the Majority Leader Cannizzaro, for listening to our concerns. And again, we appreciate her bringing forward this legislation. We do acknowledge that this is an important issue, especially considering the safety concerns. As Mr. Pirro indicated, we do have some concerns regarding the language. It appears that this would be a sentencing enhancement with a strict liability offense regarding what is a specific intent crime. So we just have some concerns with how this would play out. And I would just note that in Section 1, this is already a very substantial penalty of a Category B felony, where we've indicated that the minimum term, when usually is a 1 year on the bottom for Category B, is a 3-year, maximum of 15 years. And as noted in subsection 4, the court shall not grant probation to that person, which already indicates that this person is facing a mandatory prison sentence. So with that, we do look forward to working with Senator Cannizzaro regarding these concerns and appreciate your time and attention today.
Thank you, caller. And with that, Chair Scheibel, there are no more callers to give opposition testimony at this time.
All right, then we will begin taking testimony in the neutral position on SB 359.
Thank you, Chair. To testify in neutral on Senate Bill 359, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Once again, to testify in neutral on Senate Bill 359, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. And Chair, at this time, there are no callers to provide neutral testimony.
Thank you very much. Majority Leader Canizaro, do you have any closing remarks?
Chair Scheibel and members of the committee, I again want to thank you for letting me present to you today Senate Bill 359. We have definitely heard some of the points in opposition, and are going to reach out to those parties, try to see if we can come to some sort of consensus, and definitely appreciate Assistant Chief Heaton being here to help present the bill, and hoping to come back with something that will make sense and help us to target individuals who really are, I think, putting our community at risk. So thank you for giving us the time.
Thank you for joining us today and for presenting. I will now close the hearing on SB 359. I will now open the hearing on SB 372 and turn it back over to our fearless leader, Senator Canizaro, to present SB 372.
Thank you, Chair Scheibel and members of the committee, for your indulgence on this third bill today. I definitely appreciate it. Again, for the record, my name is Nicole Canizaro. I am the senator from Senate District 6 in the northwest portion of the Las Vegas Valley, and I'm here to present to you at this time Senate Bill 372, which revises the process of reporting burn injuries. By way of background information, burn injuries remain one of the leading causes of unintentional injury. And in the last decade, Nevada hospitals have treated tens of thousands of patients with varying degrees of burns. Healthcare providers work in conjunction with fire departments to report specific levels and types of burns as outlined in NRS 629.045. The Clark County Fire Department, for example, is the 7th busiest fire department in our country, and its personnel serve as first responders to aid in many of these burn victims every year. As a brief bill summary, Chair Scheibel, before turning it over to Dan Heenan, and we also have representatives from UMC here as well to shed some light on this issue and the reasons for bringing Senate Bill 372. I would like to walk just briefly through a very a brief introduction of the bill as written. Because fire departments in Nevada are busy with numerous responsibilities, Senate Bill 372 refines the reporting process for burn injuries. While not all injuries are attributed to arson, there is still some level of investigation that is required in each case. This bill establishes steps that need to be followed after a burn injury occurs. Primarily, it extends the necessary time frame from 3 to 7 working days to report an injury to the state fire marshal. It also limits the type of burns required to be reported by the healthcare provider after treating a burn victim. Ultimately, this will facilitate more focused, in-depth investigations into only those incidents that require it, while lessening the burden on healthcare providers and first responders to report some incidences unnecessarily. Chair Scheibel, at this point in time, I would like to turn it over to Mr. Heenan to provide some additional remarks before moving on to our folks joining us from UMC. Mr. Heenan.
Thank you, Senator. And thank you again, Senators, for allowing me to speak. My name is Dan Heenan, H-E-E-N-A-N, and I'm the Assistant Fire Chief with the Clark County Fire Department. I've been here for 3 years, and prior to that, I was a Special Agent for the Department of Justice, Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms for 30 years. The reason we brought this, I asked Senator Canizaro and had meetings with her about bringing this bill forward, is that the current bill is overly broad. I've had numerous sit-down meetings now with the doctors at the UMC Burn Center who are going to be here to speak today, and then the burn manager of the UMC Burn Center. It's the only, I don't want to say recognized because I know there's other burn centers, but it's the only certified burn center in the state of Nevada. One of the things that happens under the current statute is that certain burns are required to be reported within 3 days. And 3 days is a quick turnaround, especially for the number of victims that they're seeing in their burn center. So one of the conversations we had was that if we could do it every 7 days, that would help them push this out. The other thing is that currently we have to use the Nevada State Fire Marshal's form, which here in a city of or in a valley, Southern Valley, we like to go to an electronic form. So we've sat down with UMC and developed our own form that's going to be that's agreed upon by Henderson Fire Department, North Las Vegas Fire Department, Clark County Fire Department, and Las Vegas Fire and Rescue. That'll alleviate the hospitals from having to create different forms for everybody. We'll just have one form valley-wide that we can work on. This was proffered through the Southern Nevada Arson Task Force that we formulated down here, in which we bring all the fire investigation divisions together and work toward. The final thing is that under NRS 475.125, it's mandatory reporting that if the UMC burn center or any other burn center reports an injury to us, we are mandated to investigate that. What we'd like to do is change the word shall to may, and then allow the manager of the fire investigation division to determine whether that really needs investigating. A lot of times what we do is we rely upon the nurses and the doctors in the burn centers to tell us if the burn injuries that are being reported match the description and story presented by the victim. When they don't, that's time for the investigators to come in and do their interviews and do their background. But many times the burn nurses and burn doctors can say everything is matching up perfectly and we're fine. We don't believe this warrants an investigation. So they can still send that information to us. We'll categorize it and we'll have it in case there was a subsequent injury. But for the most part, that'll allow us to manage our time and only respond to those fires where we're actually needed. It's also overly broad about what type of injuries it is. So we want to change it to open flame and flash fires because the way it's written, it could be construed that if somebody will have a massive third degree or a massive sunburn over 5% of their body, that would have to be reported. So I'll defer to the doctor to speak about some of the other aspects of what should and shouldn't be reported in our opinion. And I'd like to thank you guys for allowing me to make my statement.
Thank you. Madam Majority Leader, would you like to go to UMC at this point or go to questions?
No, if we could go to the doctors at UMC, that would be best, Chair Scheibel.
All right, please introduce yourselves and go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Scheibel, Vice Chair Canizaro, Chief Heenan, and Dr. Sakib. My name is Yasmin Conaway. I'm a registered nurse with over 11 years experience in burn care. And I'm currently the burn program manager at the Lions Burn Care Center here at University Medical Center in Southern Nevada in Las Vegas. By way of background, we're the oldest and only verified burn center in the state of Nevada, which means we provide the highest level quality care and still pursue ways to improve patient outcomes, even after they leave the rejuvenating confines of a hospital room or seek the expertise care of our outpatient clinic team. We are fully verified by the American Burn Association, the governing body for burn care, which also sets forth guidelines and best practices. And best practices is why we're here today. The changes proposed today will provide a more targeted reporting on burn injuries caused by flame, flash, and explosions. Currently, the bill does not delineate any mechanism of injury, as Chief Heenan mentioned earlier, and it requires reporting of all types of burn injuries, including scald, contact burns, and friction burns. So the person making hot soup that spills the pot of boiling water on themselves and sustains a burn gets reported. The elderly person that's walking to the mailbox and falls on the hot pavement and sustains a pavement burn from the hot concrete in the sun, they get reported. The motorcycle driver that skids across the ground after a crash and sustains a friction burn, that gets reported. These injuries are required to be reported to the appropriate fire department for investigation. For some perspective on how many reports with the current verbiage in this bill, out of the 1,396 patients we served in 2020, there were 290 patients that met criteria for reporting. Under the proposed language, the number would drop to 140 patients, representing over a 50% decrease in reporting. What does that mean on the front line? It will allow for more efficient utilization of resources. At UMC, for instance, we have a multi-tiered process for identifying and extracting information for this report, which can take upwards of 1 to 2 budgeted hours per day. A benefit of this change would allow these resources to be redeployed to critical aspects like patient care, outreach, prevention, and burn education to first responders in the community. All this while still capturing cases that warrant appropriate investigation. Another change proposed in this bill includes the use of an approved form by the local fire departments, as Chief Heenan mentioned. The updated form would integrate seamlessly with the change stated earlier, allowing for standardization, flexibility, and cooperation and coordination amongst affected parties. Given the many benefits, I strongly encourage you all to consider passage of the revised provision of this bill. Doing so means you will be making a direct positive impact on how we use public resources, provide outreach and education, work within particular budget restraints, and benefit the health and well-being of all Nevadans and visitors. Thank you to the committee for your time, and I pass it over to Dr. Saki.
Thank you, Yasmin. Good afternoon. My name is Saeed Saqib, S-Y-E-D, Saqib, S-A-Q-U-I-B. Thank you, Chair Scheibel, Vice Chair Canizaro, and members of the committee for this opportunity to speak before you. I'm an acute care surgeon in Las Vegas for almost 5 years. I'm the medical director for UMC's Lions Burn Care Center, Nevada's first and only verified burn center. Our burn center is one of the oldest in the nation, providing comprehensive burn care for people of all ages and serving our state and communities for over 50 years. With regard to the matter at hand, this legislation would improve the current statute, which as it stands is very broad. The statute was designed as a mechanism to identify possible cases of arson that would be investigated. The current statute as written requires reporting of many burn injuries that are not related to arson to the fire department. So for example, skull burns from spilling hot tea, pavement burns from walking on or falling onto hot pavement during the summertime, or road rash burns from a motorcycle or motor vehicle collision. They all need to be reported to the fire department for investigation. By focusing reporting limited to burn injuries caused by fire, flash, and explosions, this will allow a more efficient use of resources. This will allow those resources to be reallocated to other aspects of burn care, including but not limited to clinical care, community education, and collaboration with our first responders. We'll furthermore honor the original intent of the statute, which is to capture cases that are appropriate for investigation. This bill will standardize documentation and paperwork needed for reporting such incidents and promote better coordination in between the involved parties. I respectfully and strongly encourage the committee to pass the revised provisions as it will substantially improve how we utilize resources for the benefit and well-being of all residents of Nevada. And thank you again for the time and the opportunity to speak before you.
Chair Scheibel, members of the committee, that does conclude our presentation of Senate Bill 372, and would love to stand open for any questions that members of the committee may have.
Thank you so much, Majority Leader. Are there questions from members of the committee? I'm not seeing any hands go up, and I don't have any questions myself, so we will move straight into testimony in support of SB 372.
Thank you, Chair Scheibel. To testify in support on Senate Bill 372, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Once again, to testify in support on Senate Bill 372, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. And Chair, at this time, there are no callers to give support testimony.
All right, thank you. We will move on to testimony in opposition of SB 372.
Yes, thank you, Chair. To testify in opposition on Senate Bill 372, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Once again, to testify in opposition on Senate Bill 372, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. And Chair, there are no callers to give opposition testimony at this time.
All right, thank you, Mr. Kyle. We will move to testimony in the neutral position on SB 372.
Thank you, Chair. To testify in neutral standing on SB 372, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Once again, to provide neutral testimony on Senate Bill 372, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. And Chair Scheibel, there are no callers to give neutral testimony at this time.
All right, thank you so much for your help, and thank you, Majority Leader Cannizzaro, and your guests for joining us today to present this bill. Do you have anything you want to say in closing?
No, just again wanted to extend my thanks to you and members of the committee for allowing us to present the bill today.
Fantastic. This now will close the hearing on SB 372. That brings us to the last item on our agenda, which is public comment. If there is anybody wishing to give public comment, you will have 2 minutes. And Mr. Kyle, would you please cue them to queue up now?
Absolutely, Chair Scheibel, thank you. We're currently on public comment at this time. If you'd like to provide public comment this afternoon, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. And Chair, the phone lines are open and working. However, there are no callers to give public comment at this time.
All right, thank you so much for your help. Thank you everybody for joining us for this meeting, and that brings us to a close. We will be meeting again tomorrow at the same time at 1 p.m. Until then, we are adjourned.